Hey guys, welcome to Relationship Stories with TaleTime. The first story is titled, My Wife Had a Secret Affair to Fix Our Marriage. The story starts like this. My wife Karen and I had been together for 16 years, married for 12 of them. We had 2 kids, a 10-year-old son named Tommy, and a 7-year-old daughter named Emma. From the outside looking in, I'm sure we seemed like your typical suburban family living the American dream. I was a sales manager at a tech company, putting in long hours but making decent money. Karen was a stay-at-home mom, running the household and shuttling the kids between their various activities. We had a nice 4-bedroom home in a pleasant neighborhood with a couple of cars and a dog. Every weekend during the summer we'd have friends over for backyard BBQs. The holidays were always a big deal with our extended families coming together. We'd go on road trips or beach vacations every year. You know, just living that conventional middle-class lifestyle that so many people strive for. But as the years went on, cracks began to show behind the scenes of our supposedly perfect little world. The same old patterns played out repeatedly. I'd work crazy hours to provide for my family, leaving Karen alone with the kids and the house way too much. She'd get resentful that I was never around. I'd feel unappreciated that all the income came from my job. The romance slowly petered out over time as we just fell into a rhythm of putting the kids first before everything else. We became glorified roommates, only staying together for the sake of the children. There were stretches where we'd finally acknowledge the growing disconnection. We'd try to plan more regular date nights, speak more kindly to each other, be more affectionate. But inevitably, those resolutions would fizzle out in a matter of weeks as the patterns reasserted themselves. I'd end up sneaking home video game time as my only escape from the corporate grind and pressures of providing. She'd binge-watch trashy reality TV and vent to her mom constantly about how I was the problem. Things came to a head a few times over the years with escalated fights that I'm ashamed to admit got verbally heated in front of the kids occasionally. There was a period about 3 years ago when we actually separated, and Karen moved in with her parents for a few months. But we ended up going to counseling, at least trying to make it work for the children's sake. We swept deeper issues under the rug as long as the surface appearance was okay. And for a while, the Band-Aid solutions worked. Or so I thought. Karen seemed to be putting in more effort recently. She lost some weight and started dressing nicer when she returned from her daily routine of running errands, going to the gym, kids' activities and whatnot. We were being more physically intimate again. She was in what I'll call an over-functional phase, obsessively keeping the house clean, making sure the kids' schedules ran smoothly, planning weekly date nights, and being just generally on top of everything. At the time, I thought, hey, maybe this is the kick in the pants our marriage needed. Karen is refocused on making our family her priority. What a fool I was. Because along with Karen's sudden transformation, there were little hints that something was off. Like how defensive she got anytime I asked about her daily comings and goings, just a bit too hostile about me not prying into her private life. Her phone was permanently attached to her hip, which she'd quickly snatch off the counter whenever I entered the room like she was getting mobilized for battle. Then there were times she'd leave the house in a rush, giving me a peck on the cheek while practically sprinting out to her SUV. Frankly, I excused away a lot of the signs at first because I didn't want to bring up old tensions. I'd convinced myself that as long as Karen held up her end of keeping our family going, I didn't need to know every detail about her life. We were both adults capable of having our own spaces outside the marriage, right? But over the next couple of months, Karen's bizarre behavior continued escalating. I'd get home from work to hear bathwater running, but no kids in sight, just Karen splashing around in there for an hour at a time. Boxes of slinky negligees and other wildly impractical lingerie started frequently arriving in the mail, which she'd stash away in her section of the closet. Multiple times I noticed the bed pulled apart and slightly disheveled when I'd returned from a business trip, despite Karen insisting she'd been too busy to be relaxing during the day. As Karen's strange behavior continued piling up, I knew in my gut something wasn't right. I figured she might be having some sort of midlife crisis, or maybe she had developed a problem with alcohol or drugs that she was hiding. But the truth was much more painful than any of those possibilities. It all came to a head one night when I came home earlier than expected from a work trip. I pulled into the driveway around 7 p.m. after my flight had arrived ahead of schedule. Karen's SUV was there, but the house looked dark inside, which struck me as odd. I opened the front door as quietly as I could, not wanting to alert her that I was home in case she was just zoning out watching TV or something. But it was dead silent. That's when I heard the faintest sound of muffled voices upstairs in our bedroom. My heart started pounding as I slowly crept up the staircase, wondering if Karen was on the phone or had the TV playing loudly with her bedroom door closed. But as I got closer, it definitely sounded like 2 distinct voices, a man and a woman's voice. I could make out familiar tones of Karen's laugh mixed with some deeper rumbling chuckle. When I reached the top of the stairs, I could see that the bedroom door was cracked open just a sliver, the sounds becoming unmistakable. I pushed the door open more and that's when I saw it, my wife lying naked on our bed, her body intertwined with another man who was hunched over her. The bastard's back was to me, but I'll never forget the sheer mind-numbing shock of watching my wife in flagrante delicto. She must have felt the change in air pressure or heard the door creak further, because she suddenly gasped and saw me standing there. In that split second, her eyes went wider than I'd ever seen in my life. "Oh my God," she shrieked, flailing her arms to push the man off her. He turned his head and locked eyes with me, just as blindsided as Karen was by me walking in on them. In my dazed state, I didn't even recognize him at first. It wasn't until he scrambled off the bed, hurriedly grabbing his clothes, that I realized it was Marcus, my coworker at the office, a guy I thought I knew. My body started shaking with rage as Karen desperately tried wrapping a bedsheet around herself. "Baby, I can explain," she sputtered out, still seemingly struggling to comprehend that I was actually here witnessing her betrayal. "Explain what?" I shouted, unable to control the volume of my voice any longer. "That you've been screwing your husband's co-worker behind my back? My colleague in our marital bed?" Marcus was hastily pulling up his pants now, avoiding eye contact with me as he grabbed his shirt and shoes. The coward knew he had nowhere to go except straight out the bedroom door. This isn't what it looks like, I swear," Karen cried, tears already welling up in desperation mode. We weren't really going to go through with it. We just got carried away for a second." "Oh yeah? You just got carried away letting another man have sex with you?" I roared back, the anger like a raging fire now. "How many times has this been going on behind my back, Karen? How many times have you disgraced our marriage bed with this piece of shit?" Marcus was edging for the door now, still silent and shaken as the reality of the situation dawned on him. I wasn't about to let him off that easy. "Get the hell out of my house, you scumbag," I shouted, squaring up towards him in an aggressive stance. "And don't even think about trying to show your lying, cheating face at the office again. You're done." He scrambled out without a word. The pitiful coward. I turned my wrath back towards Karen, still cowering under the bedsheets like her nakedness would somehow mitigate the circumstances. "Start talking," I growled, staring daggers at her. "Right now?" She sniffled and wiped her eyes, seemingly buying herself a moment as she formulated her story. I'm so sorry you had to find out this way. Marcus and we've been having problems for a while in our marriage. IT thought this would help fix things between us." I scrunched my face in utter bafflement. "Fix things? You thought cheating on me would fix our marriage? Are you insane?" "No, baby, you don't understand," she pleaded, reaching out to try grabbing my arm. I recoiled away from her touch. "I knew our marriage was broken," she continued between sobs. "The counseling wasn't helping. You're always working. We never have time together as a family anymore. I wanted to remind you of the passion we used to have." I couldn't believe the misguided, twisted rationalization I was hearing, as if cheating on your spouse is somehow a logical solution to marital problems. In that moment, staring at Karen's tear-stained face and listening to her delusional justifications, I made a firm decision. There was no coming back from this. No counseling, no second chances. She had shattered the sacred vow of our marriage beyond repair. I was going to cut her off completely. "Get out," I stated in a low, seething tone. "Pack a bag and get out of my house right now." Her eyes went wide with shock again. "Ooch, what?" "No, please, baby, let me explain more. It was just this one stupid mistake, I swear." I shook my head adamantly. "There's nothing more to explain. You cheated on me, Karen. You violated the fundamental trust and commitment we made to each other. With one of my co-workers, no less. In our bed?" I had to pause to collect myself, feeling disgust rise up again. Karen tried to interject with more pleas, but I raised my hand to shut her down. I said, "Get out. This marriage is over. I don't ever want to look at you again after this. Not tonight, not tomorrow. You need to remove yourself from my life completely." The tears were really flowing now as she realized I was utterly serious. She opened her mouth to lodge more protests, but I cut her off again. "If you say one more word, I'll call the police right now to report you for trespassing. Is that what you want? For the neighbors and our kids to see you getting hauled out of here in a bedsheet by the cops?" That finally seemed to sink in. Karen slowly stood up, clutching the sheet to her body as she started pulling clothes from her dresser with her free hand. She was full-on sobbing at this point, like a young child realizing they had irrevocably screwed up. Part of me almost felt a twinge of pity hearing those mournful wails. Almost, but not quite. My rage was quickly incinerating any last shred of empathy I had for her. Once she had stuffed a few days' worth of outfits into an overnight bag, Karen turned back to face me, her eyes and cheeks stained with black mascara streaks. She opened her mouth, but I held up a finger to silence her again. "Don't say anything. Not a single word? Because if you try justifying or minimizing this again, I will completely lose it," I growled in a low warning tone. "Just take your shit and get out of my house before I do something I might regret." She held her hands up in a pleading gesture, but mercifully remained quiet. Karen pulled on a pair of sweatpants and a hoodie, not even caring about her disheveled, disrobed appearance. She knew she had been utterly crushed and dismissed from my life in that moment. I followed Karen down the stairs, keeping a distance behind her like a prison guard escorting an inmate. She looked back at me a few times with those hopeless puppy dog eyes, but thankfully stayed silent. When she reached the front door and pulled it open, Karen turned around one final time, fresh tears forming in her eyes all over again. I felt a flicker of uncertainty. Was I really about to turn my back on 16 years of partnership and memories? But just as quickly, the mental images of her tangled up with Marcus came flooding back. My stomach churned with revulsion. "Get out," I said, more firmly this time, "and don't ever contact me again." Karen's face crumpled with the finality of my statement. She knew there was no coming back from the nuclear depths of this betrayal. Without another look or word, she turned and walked out the door, her body trembling with heaving sobs. I slammed and locked the door behind her. I leaned my back against it, squeezing my eyes shut as I struggled to catch my breath. It was finally sinking in. The life I thought I had was over. Karen and I were done. For the next several hours, I alternated between manic, furious energy and moments of near catatonic despair. I wildly tore our bedroom sheets and pillows off, stripping everything that had been contaminated by their adulterous filth. I drunkenly raged around the house, throwing Karen's possessions in boxes to get every last trace out of my living space. At other points, I collapsed on the floor, overwhelmed by the emotional devastation I was going through. Visions of Karen's face kept flashing in my mind, her look of terror at being caught, her pleads for forgiveness, and finally the heartbroken realization that I was kicking her out for good. I had seen every single phase of her crumple over the course of an hour, from the untamed lust of infidelity to the ultimate shame of being excommunicated from our family. Part of me wondered if I was being too rash, too extreme in my actions. Every relationship advice source always says to take a deep breath and weigh options before making huge life decisions. Maybe Karen and I could have tried working it out. Over the next several weeks, the pragmatic realities of extricating myself from this unfaithful marriage started setting in. As much as I had emotionally separated myself from Karen already, there were still endless, tedious legal hurdles to navigate through the official divorce proceedings. At first, Karen was hitting me with all the classic manipulative tactics that cheaters often resort to when faced with the fallout of their actions. She started love-bombing me with desperate pleas, telling me she had made a terrible mistake but was still the love of my life, the mother of my children, my forever soulmate. Her messages and voicemails became an endless barrage of waterworks and hollow promises to attend counseling, rebuild trust, or whatever else I wanted if I'd just take her back. I simply muted and blocked her on all channels of communication. I didn't have the time or emotional bandwidth to engage with her any further. My lawyer advised steering clear of any direct contact to prevent her from trying to gaslight or manipulate me into wavering in my resolve. When it became clear that I wasn't going to entertain her nauseating groveling act, Karen switched to trying to attack me. She accused me of overreacting to a one-time lapse of judgment, and claimed I was using the situation to punish and control her. She said I had forced her into making such a desperate act because of my constant emotional neglect and abandonment by working so much. Playing the classic "it's not my fault, you drove me to cheat" card. I'll admit, there were a few moments where I had pangs of doubt creep in, wondering if I was indeed being overly unforgiving and scorched earth about this. Every guy has that culturally conditioned instinct to forgive a cheating partner buried deep down. But then I'd vividly remember the sheer gutting pain of walking in on my wife having sex with another man in our marital bed, and those flashes of weakness instantly evaporated. This was unforgivable, period. Karen also tried using the kids as leverage, claiming my hardline stance was only going to traumatize them, and I needed to be more flexible for their sakes. She even brought them along for a planned mediation session, no doubt hoping their presence would sway me into taking her back out of guilt and obligation. If anything, having Tommy and Emma there only re-steeled my determination. Seeing the anguish and confusion on their little faces over why Mommy had to temporarily move out broke my heart. This was the price Karen was willing to pay to satisfy her selfish desires, dragging our children into her web of deceit and disrespect. I refused to let them grow up in a household where infidelity was normalized or forgiven so easily. The custody and division of assets negotiation was inevitably messy. Karen demanded an extremely generous slice of our net worth as her compensation for years of being an unpaid housewife. She tried to spin her sacrifice of dropping out of the workforce to raise our family as justifying payback in the form of cash and property distribution. My attorneys and I took the firm stance that her willfully nuking our family by cheating invalidated any claim she could make for reparations or alimony. If anything, she should consider herself lucky I wasn't trying to take her for every penny in a messy court battle after how she had disgraced our marriage. In the end, the arbitrator seemed to acknowledge how toxic and unforgivable Karen's actions had been. She got a reasonable lump sum payout from our joint investment accounts, but nothing exorbitant given her role in the marriage dissolution. Karen also only got primary custody of the kids every other week on a compressed schedule, realizing how poisonous her overall influence could be in their young lives. I got the house and majority of assets. Karen tried to make one final ploy for reconciliation just before the divorce was finalized. She demanded a sit-down meeting without our lawyers present, for old time's sake. I obliged, assuming she just wanted some sort of closure conversation to try assuaging her guilt. Boy, was I wrong? No sooner had we sat down at the neutral location than Karen launched into another barrage of blaming, gaslighting, and delusional bargaining. She claimed this whole divorce was a shame because she knew if I just took her back, we could rebuild an even stronger marriage after going through this valley together. She actually tried rewriting history, saying her infidelity was some sort of Misguided wake-up call for our marriage that ended up working, since it shattered the complacency and forced us to confront our issues head-on. As if cheating was some noble act of tough love for my own good. I couldn't believe the audacity and distorted reality she was trying to construct. I called her out for the utter lack of accountability and remorse she was showing, even at this late stage. Karen doubled down, actually having the gall to say that I was the one being selfish and rigid by not considering her perspective on how this could be a mutually growth experience. At that point, I had to walk out before I said or did something I'd regret. Her gaslighting and blatant disrespect towards the pain she had caused showed she was never going to take true responsibility. Karen fundamentally lacked the self-awareness and empathy to understand the severity of her betrayal. I exited the meeting and phoned my lawyer immediately, telling them to push through with finalizing the divorce papers as soon as humanly possible under the current terms. I was done. Karen had exhausted her last sliver of benefit of the doubt. The divorce decree came through a few weeks later, solidifying the endpoint of our failed marriage. I'll admit, there was a part of me that felt immensely relieved to have this whole agonizing chapter finally closed. But there was also an overwhelming sadness, not for Karen specifically, but for the idealized future I had once envisioned for our family. Unit Hat would never come to fruition. In a small way, I took petty satisfaction in Karen being the one forced to abruptly downgrade her living situation. She had to move into a rundown one-bedroom apartment after being ordered to vacate the family home as part of the divorce terms. I saw her resentfully hauling bin after bin of her belongings through the front door, a far cry from the comfortable life she had enjoyed as a stay-at-home mom in our well-appointed suburban residence. Meanwhile, I endeavored to create as much continuity and stability as possible for Tommy and Emma. While my work schedule didn't allow me to be a full-time single dad, I was able to upgrade to a respected position at my company with better hours and compensation. I hired a responsible nanny to provide reliable care and supervision when I was at the office. We attended family therapy consistently to help them process the trauma of their mother's choices. For the first year or so after the split, Karen makes sporadic, pitiful attempts to try wiggling her way back into our lives beyond just her custody windows. She would show up disheveled and remorseful on my doorstep with the same pleas for a second chance. She joined the same gym I belonged to under the pretense of running into me repeatedly with the hopes of reinitiating contact. A few times Tommy and Emma would slip and mention how Mom was saying she still loved me and wanted us to be a family unit again. I stoically maintained the boundaries I had erected. After the psychological torture Karen had dragged me through with her deception, I owed her absolutely nothing in the way of forgiveness or an open door. My focus was giving my kids the most stable, drama-free home environment possible now that our once happy household had been shattered. In retrospect, Karen's subsequent life seemed to go down a predictable spiral of chaos and poor choices, not unlike how many disgraced affair partners end up self-destructing. Less than a year after our divorce was finalized, she had already blown through a significant portion of her lump sum settlement on the usual vices: impulsive spending, heavy drinking, and rotating boyfriend after boyfriend in a desperate attempt to fill the void her ego had suffered. I tried my best to shield the kids from that stuff by making sure all exchanges and custody transfers were handled through neutral third parties. The last thing they needed was to be dragged back into the dysfunctional dynamic their mother was creating. At one point, Karen actually had the audacity to make a legal bid for an increase in child support and alimony payments, despite having zero grounds for it. She tried claiming I had received a major promotion with a huge boost in income from the freedom and clarity afforded by our divorce. She even trotted out her cheating as some sort of backhanded justification, saying her actions had been a sacrifice for the betterment of the family that allowed me to level up my career afterwards. The judge almost had to be held back from outright sanctioning Karen for her offensive and delusional claims. I got hit with a few thousand in legal fees having to hire representation to swat down her frivolous case, but it was worth every penny to watch her slink out of the courthouse in disgrace. While Karen continued spiraling in the years following our split, I made an conscious effort to rebuild my life in a positive direction. Getting free of her toxic presence was like lifting a heavy weight off my shoulders that had been weighing me down for years without me fully realizing it. I started actually having quality time to spend with Tommy and Emma again. We went on fun father-son/daughter bonding trips over school breaks. I got them re-involved in extracurricular activities and hobbies they had previously given up due to our household's dysfunction. We settled into a comfortable routine and rituals that brought real joy and connection to our little family unit. On the work front, I was able to pour my energy fully into career growth, now that I didn't have the draining psychological games of an unhappy marriage holding me back. I got recognized for a couple of major initiatives I spearheaded, which led to further promotions and responsibilities. The money was great, but honestly the biggest perk was the sense of control, stability, and self-actualization I felt. Within 3 years of Karen's duplicity being exposed, I had rebuilt enough confidence and peace of mind to start putting myself out there on the dating scene again. I was upfront with new romantic prospects about being a still reasonably young divorced dad of 2. To my surprise and relief, that didn't seem to be the deterrent I expected it to be in my 30s. I took things very slowly given my lingering trust issues, but eventually I met an amazing woman named Jessica who embraced the situation with grace and compassion. Far from being scared off by the cardio circumstances that branded me, she admired how devoted I was as a father living for my kids' well-being. We took our time building an amazing emotional foundation before ever introducing her to Tommy and Emma. Meanwhile, Karen's life was heading in the opposite trajectory. Between the drinking, erratic behavior, and foolish money decisions, she ended up losing her apartment after being evicted for months of non-payment. From what little the kids let slip during their custodial visits, she had ended up moving into some sort of flophouse situation with constantly rotating roommates and layabout boyfriends. Her once persistent attempts at reinserting herself into mine and the kids' lives tapered off dramatically over time. Whether out of self-wisdom or pure exhaustion, Karen just fell off the radar for long stretches. When she would sporadically re-emerge asking for money, lecturing the kids about giving mommy another chance, or demanding expanded visitation rights, the whole sad display just felt pathetic. The occasions I'd find myself unexpectedly face-to-face with the shell of the woman I was once married to were almost haunting. The tired, roomy eyes, unkempt appearance, and slurred speech said it all. I found it difficult not to feel a semblance of pity alongside the resentment. Our kids deserve so much better than having a mother who had completely stopped prioritizing being a stable, nurturing presence in their lives. In one of Karen's more lucid intervals, she did make a final misguided effort to try dragging me back into her spiral. She filed a court petition to have the child custody arrangement reassessed, doubling down on her usual lines about me being an obstructive force keeping a loving mother from her offspring. Reading through her claims, everything from me bad-mouthing her to the kids, to alienating them from her through manipulative means, to withholding her fair custody time over petty gripes, was honestly sad. Of course, the ruling came down squarely in my favor after the court took one look at Karen's frazzled state, while I had continued establishing an enriching, nurturing home environment for Tommy and Emma to thrive in. They saw the incontrovertible evidence of who was truly putting the kids' interests ahead of any selfish motivations. Karen didn't even show up for the final hearing, probably coming to terms with how marginalized she had allowed her parental rights to become. That was the last legal hurdle or headache Karen put us through. Not long after, I accepted a phenomenal regional management promotion that required us to relocate to a new city 1,500 miles away. Our relocation to Denver ended up being an incredibly positive turning point for me and the kids. Getting fully extricated from the toxic vortex of Karen's self-destructive spiral allowed us to start drilling down on building the stable, loving household we had been deprived of for so long. At first, there were definitely some bumps and adjustments to go through as we transitioned to our new hometown. Tommy and Emma had understandable periods of acting out, feeling unsettled by the magnitude of upheaval and leaving all their friends, activities, and familiar comforts behind. I made sure to stay attuned to their emotional needs during that first year, making family therapy a priority alongside getting them plugged into fresh extracurriculars. We ended up finding an amazing child psychologist who ran group sessions tailored specifically towards children of divorced parents. The ability to process their feelings around their mother's abandonment in a supportive, judgment-free zone was invaluable. Tommy and Emma both still loved and missed their mom deeply, but were able to acknowledge how Karen's self-destructive choices robbed them of having a reliable, consistent parental presence. In a strange way, the relocation actually minimized the destabilizing impact from Karen's erratic push/pull behavior over time. When we were all still living in the same metro area, her dramatic suicide attempts or ploys for re-engagement used to trigger endless worry and disruption. Now, with a few states buffer separating us, her cries for attention became more like faint white noise that could be tuned out more seamlessly. We settled into a simple but profoundly renewing daily routine. I made a point of being home by 6 o'clock every night to cook dinner and go over the day's activities. We had a technology blackout period from 7 o'clock to 9 p.m. filled with fun family activities, reading, or board games. I got the kids enrolled in a huge variety of athletic leagues, music lessons, coding camps, scouts, anything to keep them active, engaged, and constantly being exposed to fresh positive influences. The money? My new role afforded us a level of comfort and security that we never could have achieved if I'd remained stuck in the grind of supporting Karen's shopping addiction and leisured lifestyle. We were able to get a beautiful 5-bedroom home in one of the nicest neighborhoods with top-rated schools. I finally started prioritizing my own health and wellness through an expensive but phenomenal personal trainer. The kids and I took multiple overseas vacations to explore the world in ways that had been financially impossible during the marriage. Most importantly, though, I was able to be the doting, hands-on dad that my own workaholic father had never been able to prioritize when I was growing up. I stayed engaged with the kids' passions and interests. I made sure to never miss a single one of their games, recitals, or events. Building those bonds of trust, communication, and mutually cherished memories were priceless in ways no amount of money could ever replicate. There was definitely a healing process to go through before I was able to get to that point of inner wholeness and clarity though. At first, the negative voices and anxieties left over from Karen's betrayal continued replaying on a loop and haunting my new reality. I would sometimes wake up from vivid nightmares of her affair, suffering panic attacks over her, somehow finding a way to worm back into our lives and destabilizing everything. There were periods of sleepless nights, grinding anxiety, and difficulty maintaining healthy routines. It took a lot of mindset work to combat those toxic thought patterns. Whether through daily meditations, journaling exercises, or engaging an amazing therapist, I worked hard at letting go of the lingering trauma. Update. Over a decade later, I can look back at that turbulent chapter with a sense of perspective and healing. Getting completely disentangled from Karen's toxic orbit allowed me to rebuild an amazing life surrounded by people who actually add value. The kids are thriving. Tommy is getting ready to graduate college with a computer engineering degree, while Emma is tearing it up on the varsity volleyball team and looking at scholarship offers from multiple universities. We've got such a tight family bond that all the dysfunction and mind games from their mother feel like ancient history. As for Karen, she predictably crashed and burned in pretty much every aspect over the years. Can't say I was surprised after witnessing her stunning lack of ability to take accountability for her self-destructive choices. Last I heard through the grapevine, she's basically became a professional moocher, bouncing between whichever friends or family members will put a roof over her head for a few weeks at a time. Can't hold down a job, definitely not in a stable relationship, and the kids want nothing to do with her erratic behavior. In contrast, my personal and professional trajectories took off in amazing ways once I was finally freed from Karen's oppressive sphere of chaos and negativity. I ended up meeting the most incredible woman, Sophia, who became such a power of positive force in my life and the kids. We took it slow and purposeful, putting in the hard work to build an authentic emotional connection before ever introducing her to Tommy and Emma. When we did, the bonding process happened supernaturally. The kids could pick up on what a nurturing, caring presence Sophia was. 3 years after Sophia and I got married, we welcomed a gorgeous baby daughter into our family. Being able to experience that miracle of new life with a true partner who has boundless wells of integrity and kindness absolutely obliterated the last remnants of Karen's psychic weight on me. I felt reborn. On the career front, I ended up getting recruited for an incredible executive leadership opportunity that allowed me to triple my income while being based fully remote. We relocated to an amazing mountain home community in Colorado, surrounded by beautiful nature and top amenities. These days, life is simple yet profoundly fulfilling in ways I never could have grasped during the chaos of my previous marriage. Early morning hikes and mountain biking with Sophia, quality time with the kids, creative passion projects, giving back through charitable causes I care about. Just an all-around sense of peace and authenticity. As for Karen, she's a mere faint blip in the rearview mirror now. The only times I even spare her a stray thought is when reflecting on how grateful I am that her reprehensible choices awoke me from that dysfunctional trance. If she hadn't shattered our marriage by cheating, who knows how many more years I may have wasted in that poisonous cycle of codependency. And guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. If you enjoy my content, please like the video, comment with some clock emojis to show your support, and subscribe if you have not done so already. Thanks a lot, and I will see you again tomorrow.